For Kamala, and he had one question about his lying about his military service, and he said, I don't really speak English well, so that's part of the problem. But he was a governor, and so he has a record. He's going to have to answer why he wants taxpayer dollars to pay for illegal aliens to get free health care and free college tuition, why he locked down his state for Kamala, and then had National Guard troops fire paintballs at citizens on their front porch. And he said, those are serious issues he's never had to answer for. He's going to bring that up.
Because it's Jason Miller, the Trump campaign staffer, said there's an article that says they bubble wrapped Tim Walz. And look, I mean, Axios, an independent news organization, did an analysis and found there's an article that says they've done more than 7 times as many interviews. An independent news organization did an analysis and found there's an article that says they've done more than 7 times as many interviews.
Walz propelled himself onto this ticket because he was so appealing on television and because he was so relatable and likable. He should be out there more. And I think it's crazy that he's not out there more. And it is true that it also means that it puts more pressure on this night. He's going to have to answer tough questions. So will J.D. Vance.
Sure.
I do think immigration, you were talking about this earlier with the senator from Arizona, is a hard one for the
all right, everyone.
For the Harris-Walz team.
Just trying to get the stream set up.
They are most underwater.
I haven't done too many of these, so if I have any of the settings wrong, please tell me.
Some work to be done.
Let me ask both of you.
We're going to go ahead and mute that tab so that I can do some audio tests real quick. Hopefully everyone's having a good day. We're going to go ahead and mute that tab so that I can do some audio tests real quick. All right, sounds like the audio is coming through on Rumble. Let me know if the audio is coming through on YouTube as well. Okay, I'm showing that I'm live, that I'm not. Because I'm 5 minutes in. What do we got? What do we got? YouTube as well. All right, so the audio checks out there. Fantastic. I will get the screen pulled up. We're going to be just looking into a couple of other stories that are ongoing right now. We have a couple of big items, man. We've had some pretty historic flooding, pretty significant flooding down in the Carolinas and Georgia, Tennessee. And we have amazing, amazing first responders. So we can see here, we got an article or a post here on X from Nick Sotor. First responders still do not have reliable comms here in Western North Carolina after 4 days. They're getting a police escort so they can quickly deploy Starlinks across the region and are using his window Starlink to communicate with each other. It's ridiculous because the state and federal government refused to purchase Starlinks before the disaster. What he's saying is to simply spite Elon Musk. Now, I don't know how reliable that is, but hey, it's what's being reported out right now. I'm not seeing a whole lot, and I interact with plenty of fairly progressive accounts on X, so I do get to see quite a few of their posts as well. But guys, like, what is happening right now? Like, what is happening? We are not seeing, we're being told by both sides that the federal government is doing an amazing job, that the federal government is doing a terrible job in their response. Guys, I'm in West Virginia right now. I don't have access to these folks locally, right? We've got to rely on the news. Now, do you guys trust the mainstream media? Because I don't. I think that the reporting here on X is probably the closest we're going to get to accurate. So you just kind of got to look around. You got to feel out whether you think that you're getting accurate information. Now, when you see all the posts on X, you see like, oh, this Kamala's rally has 1 billion people at it. And you see the ones that are like, Trump's rally has 1 billion people at it. Guys, we got to remember that there are so many surrogates and accounts that are managed and run by the campaigns that are run by people that are just going to say positive things about each side, no matter what. No matter what. So it's just one of those things that's tiring. Greetings from Argentina. Joaquin, thank you. I appreciate it. Buenos noches, at least here. It's good to see you. I know that a lot of my people here are from South America. I do need to do an update video for Javier Milei that is in my queue to get to this week, to do an update on Javier, to do an update on it's slipping my mind right now. El Salvador. Bukele. I want to do an update there as well. So I have not forgotten about you guys. I've been extremely busy, just trying to get some video content out, do a lot of the reactions. And guys, I may not know Spanish, but if you have music you want to see me react to that's from South America or anywhere else, feel free to leave recommendations in the comments on the channel, and I will try and get to those as well. I don't discriminate. I may not understand it great. I might have to turn on auto subtitling to get a little bit of a translation, but hey, we'll figure it out. So thank you for joining us from Argentina. Good to see you. But yeah, just in general, guys, like, you got to realize in these elections, there is gonna be propaganda from all sides. From all sides. You just got to be able to think for yourself. Like, just look at what both people are putting out on their websites. You know what? While we wait, what is it? So we will pull up the platforms for both candidates. So let's just see. Both also, when you go to their websites, it's hilarious. They immediately go to donation pages. Immediately. So issues. Okay, here we go. So let's get this pulled up. So we have Agenda 47, folks. I don't care how many times. They try and tell you that Project 2025 is Donald Trump's project. Look, guys. From what I can tell, the Heritage Foundation since 1981 has been putting out these road maps or pathways to whatever they call them. They've been putting out these things. This is many iterations of this document in. They release these documents, these roadmaps every cycle. And it's just basically a wish list. And sure, Heritage Foundation can make these documents. They're privately run. They can generate these documents for whoever they want. But in general, they're trying to tie Trump directly to. They're trying to tie Trump directly to that document, right? But the fun thing is, and you see a lot of independent reporting on this, so take it with a grain of salt. This is an account. I don't know who Keith James is. Just happened to be one of the people. Well, let's see if we can find a better one. Let's see if we can find a less biased account. Let's see, Dom Luker. Nope, we're not gonna. Do we have like a more? How are you? I am doing as well as can be expected for somebody who works 60 hours at a job, comes home, and is a single father of 2 very young children, and then also does a YouTube channel on the side. So, look, I'm blessed to have the health and the energy to be able to keep this pace going. So, could definitely be worse. Things could be better. I could just have amazing success right now. But until I get that, I'm going to keep working. And that's the important thing, right? Got regurgitating. People find out the group created, endorse. Yep. Let's see. Well, that's definitely not going to be a reliable one. So this is what I'm saying. You got to really look, right? You can't just pick the first. So Amuse, let's see, what is yours? Conservative headlines with a dash of satire, supporting independent journalism. Okay, so we'll pick this. Take it again with a grain of salt. But you can see here, Project 2025, Heritage Foundation trustee Mickey Edwards makes waves with Kamala Harris endorsement. Look, this guy helped author the document. So do you think that which of these two scenarios do you think is more likely? Do you think it's more likely that secretly, Trump decided to read a 900-page document and get together with them and help author it and work on all this stuff, and then decide that he was going to hide that fact from everybody, claim that he didn't do it? Or do you think that the document may have been created by somebody or a group of people that do not like him, to give the other side a talking point and to be able to say, look, we made this for Trump. Use this as a talking point against Trump. And with the consistent messaging that we've seen about Project 2025, Trump, Project 2025, Trump, Trump, Project 25, like the consistent messaging is so consistent. It feels very coordinated to me. It's like whenever you see the montages of the news channels and everybody else all using the exact same words when talking about a story, right? It's just not believable. It really just feels like they're all getting their talking points from the same place, whether it's one political party or the other. Doesn't really matter, guys. It doesn't. But the fact is, they're all getting these talking points from somewhere. And I just don't like it. But in general, if you look at Agenda 47, what does he want? Seal the border. Makes sense. Carry out deportation. Okay. I don't know how realistic that is, guys, but we'll see. And inflation. That is much trickier than you might think. And also, most of these things, and you'll see this on both platforms, guys, most of these things they cannot do by themselves. They just can't. They're going to run on these things. They're going to see these are their policy positions. But these are not things that a president can do running the executive branch by themselves. This takes help from the legislative branch. This takes the judicial branch supporting them. This takes a coordinated effort, guys. But they're just saying, I want to be a leader and I will push these positions and we will try and get these done. A lie repeated 1,000 times becomes a fact, as they say, especially when different sources point according to, same talking point. Completely agree, Joaquin. Completely agree. I believe I'm saying that correct. Yes, Joaquin? They're just going to keep hammering that same thing home every day, all day. Same message, as many accounts as they can get. Both sides do it. It's called propaganda. It's not just Russia, guys. Like, everybody propagandizes everybody else. Our government does it to us. Our government does it to the rest of the world. The rest of the world does it to themselves. And the rest of the world does it to us. So this is not a unique problem. It just isn't. Make America a dominant energy producer. That makes sense. One of the very best ways that you can lower prices for things, make energy cheaper, more plentiful, brings the overall cost of production of everything down. Because the cost of power, to generate the power, to run the factory, to make the goods, to transport the goods, to run the stores, like all that stuff gets cheaper if energy is more abundant. Stop outsourcing. I agree. Like, I'm sure that a lot of people love the fact that we outsource so many jobs. It's just not helping us. Large tax cut for worker, no tax on tips. That's going to be huge. And they also announced that they're trying to get no tax on overtime. If they could pull off no tax on overtime, guys, that's a huge pay raise for me. I'm working, 10 hours of overtime a week at minimum. So that would be huge. Defend the Constitution. Yep. General words. Prevent World War III. Well, guys, we might have started that today. So good luck. Stop the weaponization of government against the people. Guys, the selective enforcement of our laws is so destructive to public trust. If you have a D next to your name, they're just all about letting you get away with everything. Cashless bail or no cash bail, whatever they want to call it. These people are committing serious crimes and they're just being let go. Like, why? That's not how El Salvador fixed their problem. They either sent them here or they allowed them to come here. I don't want to say sent. Sent makes it sound like it was intentional, but they either locked them all up or they let them leave, right? So they're turned from one of the most dangerous places in the world to one of the safest. You get rid of your criminals, guys. Get safer. Rebuild cities. Yep, we just had a bunch of infrastructure failures, guys. This hurricane that went through, we had significant dam failures in Tennessee and North Carolina. We really need to start focusing on that stuff. Dollar is the world reserve currency. I don't know if I like that idea, but hey, if that's what our long-term policy is built on, that's what it's built on. We got to figure out how to make it work. Protect Social Security, Medicaid with no cuts. That is not realistic, guys. That is just not realistic. Let's see if you got the U.S. debt clock. Guys, I will tell you right now, look down here. Look down here in the corner. U.S. unfunded liabilities, $219 trillion. Guys, $219 trillion. You've got to cut. You've got to cut things. I'm sorry, nobody wants to hear it. I'm not planning on any of that stuff being there, and neither should you. $219 trillion, guys. Insane. Cancel electric vehicle mandate. Hey, let the market dictate that stuff, right? And then let's look at the issues for Kamala. We've got cut taxes for the middle-class families. Whole bunch of words. I don't really want to read them, but they're committed that no one under 400 grand, they're not going to pay any more taxes. I don't think I believe that, but we'll see. Then we got Joaquin. Respect for the Constitution is extremely important for all aspects of society, especially the economy. Yes. How can you expect business to invest in a nation where everything changes every 4 years? Good point. Right? Like long-term investments ain't going to happen because 4 years from now, everything might hunt 180, right? And it's because, like Joaquin points out here, they don't respect the Constitution. One side wants to completely eliminate it. The other side says they want to protect it, but all they really do is write harsh words against the progressives when they are making significant moves to eliminate it. So I don't know what the answer is there, guys. We have two parties that are so polarized at this point that it's going to be a tough path back to normalcy if we get it at all. And I really, really mean that. And I hope that we do. Make rent more affordable and home ownership more attainable. That's fine. But if you're going to do it by price controls and by printing money to give to people, so $25,000 to help with down payments and all these other things, if you're going to do $20 billion to middle-class families, like, guys, we can't keep printing money. Inflation is real. Grow small business, invest in entrepreneurs. Look, they're going to give more money. They're going to print more money. Yep. Take on bad actors and bring down costs. So now they're talking about price controls. They're talking about banning on corporate price gouging. Who decides what corporate price gouging is? Joaquin, who do you think is going to decide that? A nonpartisan, independent person? Or is a partisan person in the government going to decide when a company is charging too much for a product, guys? That future is terrifying to me. And that's my opinion. You can have your own. But when the government starts picking winners and losers, guys, super dangerous place to be. We have a couple of minutes still before the start. Support American innovation and workers. I agree. How are they going to do that? They're going to spend a bunch of money. That's invest. Okay, private sector, double investments in construction, affordable internet. Guys, you know how much money they spent trying to put broadband in the United States and haven't connected anybody? Let me see if I can. Sorry, little pause here, but let's see. How much did the government spend? Guys, don't rely on main search engines. They're awful. Let's see. Let's look on X. Oh, here we go. I'll pull it right up. I'll get to your comment in just a second. 3 years ago, Joe Biden bragged about $42 billion broadband internet bill to connect rural America. They have connected 0 people. Guys. 0. 0 people. 0. That's insane. Absolutely insane. So Joaquin says, I utilize my country as an example because it's my firsthand experience changing laws and papers according to the whims of those who were in power at the time, printing money and gifting goodies. Giving goodies away just to win elections always ends in disaster. Yes, because every side is just going to promise more free stuff than the other side to get political power again. And then when no one can pay for it, like what are we going to do, guys? What are we going to do? Just printing money into infinity to give free stuff to everybody? What do you think the cost of a bowl of noodles is going to be 25 years from now if we keep doing this? Everyone's going to be a millionaire because the currency is going to be worthless. Not worth less, worthless. Since 1913, when the Federal Reserve started, the value of the US dollar has decreased 98%. So if you were a millionaire in 1913, you would have to have $50 million today to have the same purchasing power. You know, everyone's always saying you got to have a six-figure job, right? You got to make $100,000 a year. That's like a minimum. Guys, that doesn't even cut it anymore in areas like where I live. In the Northern Virginia, what is it? DMV, DC, Maryland, Virginia, like this whole area where I'm at, Panhandle of West Virginia, guys, 100,000 ain't cutting it. I have 2 kids in daycare. You want to know how much that costs every month? It's almost $3,000 a month to put my 2 kids in daycare and in school. My mortgage, $3,000. I have over $6,000 in expenses, and I haven't even bought food or paid utilities yet, guys. This crap is not sustainable. It just isn't. Again, it looks like we should be starting here soon. But do you think we're going to start on time? We have 1 minute. I don't. Yeah, I completely agree, Joaquin. You cannot just promise free shit to people to win an election. Like, if you do that, it's just going to be disastrous. It's not going to end well for anybody. It's just not going to be good. In fact, I'm going to throw that in there. Completely agree. Completely agree. Let's see where we're at. That's do I have the tab muted? I think I do. Yep, see you guys doing this live.
Well, it is the top of the hour.
Doing it live.
9 p.m. here in New York City. We are just seconds away from tonight's only vice presidential
seconds
debate
away, you
between
say?
Republican Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
That's right. It is also potentially, if you haven't noticed, possibly the last debate we will see before Election Day. Election Day now just 35 days away, 5 weeks.
We have kind of set the table here on what people will be looking at and what we'll all be talking about in a little while. We will have in-depth analysis once the debate concludes.
I don't care about you guys. Joaquin's making another comment. It says, Argentina swapped currencies 5 times during the course of the 20th century, thanks to populist policies. Yeah, how is everything going there right now? A lot of the media reporting happening here in the United States is saying that things are awful. And I don't know who to trust. And I figure if you're in Argentina, I'd trust you more than I trust my media here. Oh, don't worry about it. I get it. Hey, man, I grew up chatting on all kinds of programs, hitting enter way too many times. Don't worry about it. We have not enabled slow mode, so feel free to type as many messages as you need. It's not a nuisance. Don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how things are going in Argentina.
We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
Oh, they're already there.
Republican Senator J.D. Vance, tonight meeting for the first time.
All right, this should be interesting.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to.
Who wants civil?
Questions will be directed at
I'm
one
gonna just pull it up real quick on my phone and make sure that we're actually live on
candidate will be allowed 2
all the
minutes
platforms
for
that we're
rebuttal.
supposed to be.
Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate.
Also going to be recording it.
Enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene. And now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time.
Fantastic.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started.
Guys, can we ratchet things down? That's insane. That's a crazy first question. Preemptive strikes, can we not? Can we just not?
Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just...
Okay, so they're attacking Trump, which is a weird tactic because that's not Vance.
Understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said...
So again, trying to attack Trump's ego, but Trump's not here. So I wonder what JD is going to respond with.
Donald Trump said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together. Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see...
Elections made fraud very easy to commit. Okay, so he's undertaking important economic and deregulatory reform, which we need a lot of, guys. I actually hope that we follow y'all. I know that Milei was talking about wanting to follow the United States in a lot of his pursuits, but I feel like you guys are being a better example to the West than we are right now. So
your time is up.
I hope that everything goes well for you.
Would you support or oppose a preemptive...
Also, he was just shitting on Trump with that. He didn't really answer the question much.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are.
That's true.
I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance.
That's like a Kamala message.
My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States
which
as
they
well.
will.
Donald Trump
I have a video on
that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States...
Yeah, guys, I made a video about us fighting our own weapons decades after we give them to somebody. It's going to happen again.
Preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump.
They also pretend like Kamala is not currently in office, but Joaquin said, I do see the future is hopeful, though I have my reservations about certain things in Malay's government, specifically certain important people, such as his sister, who holds a Rasputin-like influence. That doesn't sound good. Hopefully that gets addressed. But yeah, I think overall, it's a net positive, right? It seems like there's more good than bad, but again, the media reporting here in the States is not good. Like they're always saying very negative things.
Did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership.
Is this the Obama leading from behind thing?
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal.
Does anybody believe they actually did?
Recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now.
They keep trying to pretend like she's not currently in office.
October 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump.
And it was after we left billions of dollars in weapons in Afghanistan. And then they all started showing up, North Africa, Iran, like everywhere.
Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out?
41.
The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Correct.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to.
Yeah,
Nora?
crazy change,
Thank
right?
you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record.
Yeah.
More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger,
climate change
stronger,
question, really, guys?
and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans,
I'll get to your comment in a second, Joaquin.
60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first,
you know, the mile thick sheets of ice might have something to say about it that left since the last ice age. That happened when everything got warmer before industrialization.
With a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor...
Yeah, guys, down in Argentina, like, pray for the people up here, man. We had huge natural disasters this week. The hurricane just decimated entire cities. So just prayers, please, for the people in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. Like it was not good.
And Appalachia, all across the Southeast, they need their government to do their job. And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true.
Weird.
Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America,
as clean as
we're
possible.
The cleanest economy in the entire world.
That's right.
What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with
then
the
why
governors.
aren't you helping?
Co-chair of the Council of Governors, as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And
we were a net energy exporter before they took office.
Thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters?
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats...
So they're conflating two separate issues, guys. They're conflating climate change with man-made climate change. They're trying to muddy the waters there.
United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years.
Senator.
Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant
look at Tim.
we're doing
Senator,
worse
your
by the
time
climate.
is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But
that sounds like it's in spite of them, though, because they have restricted leases on federal land.
Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future.
How are we going to weatherproof topsoil?
Burying our power lines. How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're
just going to throw that in there?
The crisis at the
From
US
where?
border consistently
and what's the cause?
one of the top issue for American
Nobody knows.
voters. Senator Vance.
Other than the big ball of nuclear fire in the sky, guys. But it can't possibly be that.
American history, and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming in.
Yeah, guys, one of the main reasons that the border bill got shot down by Republicans
I don't want people who are struggling
is that the funding for the additional agents they wanted, they just wanted to process people across the border faster. It wasn't that they were trying to reinforce the border, right? And there's always the rhetoric where it's like anti-Mexican or anti-South American. Guys, there are over 100 countries of origin coming across the border. We have to control it in a legal manner. If people want to come here, that's great. There's a legal process to do it. I hope they do it because the people that are willing to do those things, they bring value with them, right? Like 100%. And I really hope that all these countries that people are flooding out of to come here, I hope they get better so people want to go back home to their countries of origin so that they can be proud members of those societies again. We're already seeing a lot of repatriation to El Salvador after Bukele imprisoned a lot of the gang members there and made it safer. I hope that all of your countries are great. I hope that all the countries can be great.
Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Ooh.
Governor,
what's that response going to be?
Respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things.
Well, I don't think she's doing that.
That's not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And
Yes.
the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol.
Why did we change from most or all to most?
That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
It had more money for climate change and everything else in it than it actually did for the border.
I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said...
And the Uniparty is trash, guys, trash. Oh, Republicans supported it. Yeah, rhinos, nobody likes them, they're trash.
Detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch.
Neither side in the legislative branch wants to solve anything. Nothing. They don't want to solve any of it because the same thing he just pointed out, like it's a good point. Both want to run on all of these issues. No politician seems to want to fix any of these problems. That's something that I respect Milei about. He ran on fixing stuff and he just started chainsawing departments of government. That's what we need here.
Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at.
Who else is looking forward to the Department of Government Efficiency? Anybody? Anybody else?
Even if their kids are U.S. citizens. You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules. And it is a disgrace and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country.
I mean, guys, when your enemy and when other people are telling you what they want to do, I would advise you to listen to them because they might just be telling you exactly what they want to do.
Borders czar was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened
the other part of that, guys, if
leading to massive problems in the
like
United States of America.
They're telling you what they want to do, but they're counting on everybody being so partisan and so tribal that you're just not willing to consider that your party might be doing the wrong thing. And if you look at the long-term consequence of pumping in millions and millions of people that aren't adapting to our culture, we're losing our culture, guys.
This is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator
guys, everybody in government demonizes everything.
Bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people.
With rare exception.
In the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true.
Oh, now we're getting into the cats.
There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield.
I'd have to go find my post. I can't find that tweet right now.
Law enforcement.
I made a real fun AI graphic for that. Maybe I'll show you after the stream.
Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our border czar, Kamala Harris, has been, and it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these things they want control of, right? There's already laws on the books for these things. They don't really need more laws.
the border.
They don't.
Legally. You've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well,
little wedge.
It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable. But it becomes a...
Oh yeah, which party does BlackRock support, folks? Let's I'm actually curious about that. Let's see if I can find
7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. Look, I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it, and it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn out of the economy. Thank you,
Margaret. The rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole,
He just
and
took
be
control.
granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Jeez.
Thank you, gentlemen. We want to have...
That's annoying. We have a lot to get to.
Gentlemen,
bad luck.
The audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process.
I thought there was no audience.
Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that
per
without
year?
ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things.
Yeah, guys, they say that they're only going to tax billionaires and stuff. If you took 100% of the money of every billionaire in the United States, you'd have $4.48 trillion. That's not enough.
As far as the housing goes,
just not enough.
I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis. Prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit. We have one in Minnesota. Reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it. It would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system...
There's not enough there, guys.
Folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan.
Like, there's just not enough money there.
Increase the nation's deficit by
both sides are going to be printing money, folks. Don't kid yourself. Both sides print money.
How do you pay for all that without ballooning the
happen.
deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies, and what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 6%.
At least.
Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans.
So yeah, guys, she is the president of the Senate right now. As the vice president, people are like, she has no control over anything. She is a member. She's the president of the Senate. She was the tie-breaking vote on 33 bills.
Policies to deliver the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live.
Hey, Chicken, I completely agree. Says, man, Vance sounds really good, logical, and articulate. Yeah, so far, Tim has not been able to ruffle his feathers. I think he's doing a pretty good job.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy.
I think Vance is definitely looking a lot more put together.
10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president...
Have you met our government, bro? They can't be trusted. Operation Mockingbird. Look it up. I dare you.
People at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers...
Hey, guys, listen to me real close. Listen, trust the government. Don't worry. I'm from the government, and I'm here to help. Come on, man.
That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore.
I really need to get my soundboard hooked up. That was epic.
American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff, and this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it in my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics show that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens.
Yeah, I got my soundboard working.
By a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
Please. We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions.
Maybe.
We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. The Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out,
I also used the GI Bill. It's not a bad deal.
To travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am.
Why?
They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people.
Yeah, guys, a lot of the criticism of his record is that he was fairly moderate as a senator, and when he became governor, he became much more progressive.
Get caught up in the rhetoric, but being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID.
Pretty sure that he's been to China.
Trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community, and then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment.
Oh, check it. Like, I think we all know nobody answers questions in these debates. Like, it's very rare.
Those are the things that I think are the values.
So when JD did it, it was a little bit surprising.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
Just, what I said on this spoke on this, so I will just. That's what I've said.
I'm going to punt.
So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
What just happened?
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation.
That was super strange, man. I want to say weird, but that was a super strange. He got like really locked up on that. He was not expecting that question.
You then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people.
Yeah.
Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues.
And to answer the question. It's weird.
Margaret, I've been extremely consistent.
It's a good point, Chicken.
There were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator, that Congress is not just a high...
Yeah, guys, I pointed that out right before the stream, right? Most of the things that these candidates want to do requires Congress to cooperate.
So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue.
Joaquin, the debate is scheduled for 90 minutes, so that would be another 45 minutes or so.
Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is
Makes sense.
Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion.
He returned the power to the states where it belongs, according to the 10th Amendment. Why is that a problem for everybody? I don't understand it.
It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now,
feels like it's a very prepared response. Like, I'm not saying they knew the questions, but like they knew there was going to be a question about this.
So in Minnesota, what we did,
he did a lot of work on this one.
Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancy.
It's not theirs.
It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed.
What is our business? Too many microplastics in your balls.
States will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota,
guys, infant mortality was already high in the United States. For the Western world, we are not ranked well for that.
Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that.
Well, guys, we also need to have policies that incentivize that behavior. And right now, a lot of the policies don't.
Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a
guys, I get it. It's a sensitive topic and there's always going to be outliers and edge cases. But why does the responsibility for your body and like start after you're pregnant? Where is the responsibility for the people who are making choices with who they're sleeping with and they are getting pregnant? Like I said, I know there are edge cases and outliers where the people are not making that choice and they're being forced, and that's awful. And I think most people I know understand that people should be heavily punished for doing that to another human being. But guys, where's the responsibility where you choose to get with somebody and then you're like, oh, look, hey, I didn't want it, but I still wanted to have my fun.
The question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, you know, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their
because most of the time, the economy just doesn't support single parent, like single income households, is what I was trying to say. Both people have to work. So yeah, getting pregnant can be significantly complicating to a household if both people need to work.
Real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
Well, I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications.
Most of them have the freedom to make that choice before they get pregnant, Tim. That's my stance. You can talk about it in the comments, but I think there needs to be a lot more individual responsibility on the people that are making those choices willingly.
Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Honestly, this topic, though, is so divisive. It's not a winning topic to discuss in a debate forum like this. It just isn't. Everybody understands the position that everybody takes, and no one's going to be happy with the outcome.
To try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
but
this.
How?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, getting engaged, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us.
I want the federal government involved in as little as possible. As little as possible, please.
They get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
All right, so it looks like we're going to commercial, so we'll see. We'll just turn down the volume a bunch. But yeah, guys, what do you think of the debate so far? I think that Chicken's comment about Vance sounding really good, logical, and articulate. I think that's pretty on point. I think in general, he seems more calm and collected. You saw there, even at the end, Tim was getting pretty agitated. Walls, but I can't call him Walls. That's just weird. I was in the military. I love calling everybody by their last name. I just can't. Calling a dude Walls is just weird. but he seems to be getting more flustered than JD is. So I think the calm and collected points go to JD in the first part. Let's see, diverting from the questions. Yeah, definitely answering questions, guys. We're doing much better answering the questions. That's definitely going to JD in the first part. It just really feels like Tim is just not interested in answering the questions that he's being asked, right? He's just doing what politicians typically do, which is provide non-answers to everything. But yeah, so appreciate it, Joaquin. Thank you for the hoping that situations get better for the families. Yeah, in the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, I completely agree. But yeah, what are you guys' thoughts? Do you think that we have someone that's clearly winning right now? Are you impressed with the reactions that we're getting and the answers that we're getting? Like, what do you guys think? It's expected in a debate for the candidates to avoid the questions. I agree, Joaquin, and I just wish that wasn't the case. Because really, the debates are the few times that we actually get to see these people and hear them answer questions, whether it's a question that we would answer, question that we would ask or not is not as relevant, but just kind of seeing how they process questions, how they answer questions, or don't, as politicians tend to do. Like, I just... Nick Sotor's comment. So let's pull up a couple of comments going over on X right now. We'll not worry about Diddy right now. Nick Sotor, why the hell did we pick this? Why did Kamala pick this clown? Don't know. Can we agree that JD Vance was the right pick? I think so far, definitely doing better. That's my opinion. You guys can have your own. That's fine. Feel free to voice it. Here you got Tim Pool. Yeah, he floundered. When he got challenged by the moderator, he just didn't know what to do. Yeah, why he was in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square. Yeah, I mean, yeah, both candidates are pretty decent personally, much more respectful to each other than what I'm used to seeing in Argentina. I mean, and they are being more respectful to each other than even the presidential candidates are being, right? We saw a lot of back and forth and a lot of things that just, they were not nearly as nice to each other for sure in the presidential debate between Donald and Kamala. So CBS is obviously attempting to help Walz and undermine Vance. That's Derek Evans. He is was a legislator here in West Virginia where I am. So good to see your comments there. How's the debate go? That face, right, guys? That face. JD Vance fact checks the CBS moderators after they attempt to fact check him about the migrants in Springfield before he can finish explaining how the administration has allowed 800,000 migrants to enter the U.S. lawfully via the CBP One app. CBS cuts his mic. Yes, Roz alerts. Always good to see you on X as well. Say that's true. But yeah, definitely. I'm assuming that comment was about the presidential candidates and their lack of respect for each other. But let's get it pulled back up. All right.
To the CBS News vice presidential debate.
Okay.
We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic, the leading cause of death for children and teens.
That's not true, by the way. I can pull that data up at the end. They have to include up to 19-year-old adults.
Legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence.
Fact check them now.
Red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents,
just bear with me. I'm trying to find that data real quick.
Such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we
probably
do
not
have
a good
to do
idea
better.
to laugh. It's a little awkward, but
probably agree
doesn't
that we
look
need to
good.
do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90%, and some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns.
I just wanted to show you this real quick, guys. This is what they're talking about.
The amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today
where did it go? Where did it go? I just saw it.
Years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this.
Here we go. Leading cause of death among children and adolescents. So they don't ever talk about this. 1 to 19 years of age.
Unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make
so it's not really. It's disingenuous to say that it's children.
Stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers because.
So they have to remove 0 years old to get rid of infant mortality. Because that's a huge one, and it's 1 to 19 gives you that stat where it becomes higher for gun violence.
And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents. And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do.
The CDC does it. They keep the stats on it.
I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that.
Yes.
But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership.
What was that swallowing sound? Who was that?
Things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney...
I'm with Tim Pool. Nuclear weapons for everybody.
It's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Guys, the majority of this violence is gang violence, and it's mostly handguns.
Okay, Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem.
He is just owning the word weird tonight, and it's funny.
We have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole...
Guys, they're saying, I looked up the data the other day, 25% of women, adults, have been on an antidepressant within the last 30 days in the United States.
But is the terrible gun
mental
violence
health
problem
is a serious issue here.
And this is why we have
our
to
diet
empower
sucks.
law enforcement to arrest
get
the
RFK
bad
in there,
guys,
make America healthy again,
and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but it only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age...
Did he just say he became friends with school shooters?
practice. That's not where we live today. And
bad luck, bro.
Several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at. The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues. Making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns. And there are things that
guns don't kill people by themselves, dude.
This is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing.
Hard segue, guys. Hard segue.
More than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. And
I'm raising the price when I go to sell my properties, minimum $50,000 if that happens.
New homes.
Just like everybody else that's going to sell a property.
And won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing.
Yes, it will.
And I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was.
Hey, that is unrelatable, dude.
I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money.
That only works if there are jobs to go to, though.
Some common ground in, but we can't blame,
what are we seeing a lot of? Jobs are going overseas.
That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices.
Supply and demand.
Are you going to build all the new homes you're promising? And what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all,
if you deport 20 million people, there's going to be lots of homes for sale.
But we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her.
Yeah, I mean, keep hammering that home, right, guys? Like, they're going to keep hammering home that she's been there. Why didn't she do these things? It's a good question. Why didn't she? I don't know.
Prices. As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive.
Correct.
If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Pretty much everything. Energy drives costs for almost everything.
Governor, we will get to you in a moment, but Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land.
Yeah, guys, part of the problem right now is we are developing on the outskirts of cities, and that is in rural areas. We are developing farmland. We're getting rid of farmland. We're stripping the topsoil off and shipping it somewhere else. And then we are building homes on arable cropland.
Well, of course,
it's a terrible idea.
Facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like there's a chance to make money here.
It is a commodity, though. It's built with commodities.
Better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses.
Like, do you guys disagree with that? Like, I'm curious. Do you guys think a house is a commodity?
On this, economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that
basic supply and demand.
There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are
No. Stop conflating.
Reserve study that we're happy to share.
Illegal immigrants, not migrants.
Social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers.
What we used to be, anyway.
Federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations?
So basic building codes?
Responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell.
Yes.
Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe.
I question how, though, guys. Like long term, we're $200+ trillion in unfunded liabilities. How do we insure? Is it really insurance anymore at that point, or is it like a giveaway? Because if they have a pre-existing condition and you're offering them insurance, what are they insuring? You're just helping them pay for their health care at that point. It's not an insurance.
It's the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you...
Not as clear as I would have hoped, but better than Trump's answer.
And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to.
I'm covered because I have a job, thankfully. So, like, my employer provides me fairly decent health care.
Repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is...
A lot of people are not a fan of him.
If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the
Signing off for the night. Have a good evening, Patriot. Thank you, Joaquin. Very good to see you. Appreciate you joining from Argentina. Like I said, I'm going to be working on trying to get a Malay update video out. If you have any links, throw them in. Just make a comment on one of my videos. Throw a link to any of the updates you think I should watch for Malay, and I will try to get a video out in the next week. So thank you. Have a good night.
Because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray,
well, that's how insurance typically works.
You're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and...
You will. Thank you very much, Joaquin. Appreciate it.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges.
Yes.
Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had
So the fine to not have insurance was much cheaper than having insurance. So if you were a young, healthy person, you got rid of your insurance, and then if you got sick, you got it back.
consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people, whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens? So you think the individual mandate's a good idea? You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be.
Vance just looked at the camera like,
people expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris.
I mean, if you're at life expectancy, should you be buying health insurance?
Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America.
Let's.
There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries.
However, Ms. Wendy, if you're watching, I greatly appreciate you all. It's expensive, but my kids love you.
Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress works. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota.
It also keeps them employed.
You have a child.
If they have to choose between that and staying home, they're going to just stay home.
This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home.
Long-term disability.
That means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is,
oh God, don't get me started on unions. I've worked in union shops and non-union shops. You don't want to hear my opinion.
The families are
you don't.
To the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents.
Guys, we should be focusing on making it so that we don't have to have both parents working. And we need to start incentivizing culture that actually keeps families together. Look, I'm a single dad. It sucks to try and figure out how to make ends meet and make sure that the kids are well taken care of. It's not ideal. It should not be the norm.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees?
We should just incentivize people to have one person work, one person stay home.
Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats too have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator, and I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extremely extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company, but the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive.
Also, guys, let me know, what is your thought? I feel like we should also be staying closer to our extended family and using them to help out on a lot of, not using might be the wrong word, but we should be leveraging our extended family.
A lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare.
Well, I mean, great. I appreciate the comment, Gray. I have made up my mind in who I'm voting for. I'm still listening to both sides. However, I am a single father with kids in childcare. This topic actually matters to me. So,
you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot.
If you want to be negative or derogatory about it, that's up to you.
People who feel like they don't have options.
I can't help you
like
then.
They're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said...
Yeah, I think policy-wise, guys, we got to set our families up to succeed better. And I don't think we're doing that. I don't think either party's doing it right now.
Nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said...
I do.
As much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies.
If they can actually make that work, that'd be good, but it's high risk, man. High risk.
Jobs overseas. That's the heart of
so
the
we'll have to see how that turns out, because I don't know if it's actually going to work that way.
Additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Guys, I just don't know if it's really the purview of the federal government to be offering those kinds of benefits. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think the federal government should be doing that?
Resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz,
and shout out to the people that do it, though. Like I said, Ms. Wendy, you're amazing. Your people are amazing. The school my daughter goes to is amazing.
$6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised. Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this.
Where?
We got out of an imbalance on this.
It's almost $2,500 a month for me for my 2 kids to be in daycare.
I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options.
That's almost as much as my mortgage.
We need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about
we need to be enacting government policies that incentivize people to have more kids then, yeah?
Inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign
and
others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The
Okay, we're talking about 2020 real quick.
State in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020.
Yeah, guys, we have a population crisis in the West. The West is just not above replacement levels. That's part of why we need to bring in as many migrants as we do. There's a lot of complicated things that go into that. We're just not having enough kids to keep everything going. In the long term, we're going to end up like Japan if we keep doing this. And we're not going to have enough young people to fill these jobs. Our economy is not going to do well in the end. Like,
the results, I'll give you 2 minutes.
we need to have more
First
kids.
of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable.
Yay, another not answering the question.
Because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside.
Guys, John Kerry talking, I think it was yesterday, about the First Amendment being a barrier to
fellow citizens, and it's Kamala Harris
scary.
That rather than
I don't like
debate and
it.
persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle.
Well, and guys, it's like when they banned Nick Fuentes, right? Like, by silencing people, you just silo them and you let them make themselves more extreme. The best disinfectant is sunlight. Have discussions with people. It's the best way to refine your positions. It's the best way to come to an agreement of some sort. Like, we're never going to get there if we just silence people that are saying things that we want to call misinformation, especially if it's just because it's inconvenient for us.
It's troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there.
They did not die from injuries from January 6th, though.
In St. Paul, and said, we're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter.
The current vice president is talking about jailing.
This issue,
like, this is a weird topic for either side to be talking about right now. Both sides are talking about jailing the other. It's a losing topic for both.
On January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond?
Good answer.
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, It's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember,
I don't think he'll want it.
For years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016.
All the way back to 2000, guys. 2000. I have a video on that too.
Putin, because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the
Why does Tim look surprised?
I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point.
Every election has been contested since at least the year 2000. At least the hanging chads.
Massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up.
Oh, don't bring that up. That is a losing topic for you, bud.
I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people.
Hate speech is fake.
That is a threat to democracy.
It's not a real thing. It's made up.
This present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about.
There can be speech you don't like, but hate speech is a made-up concept.
That's the test. That's the Supreme Court.
And if you disagree, let me know. But
in a crowded theater, you guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate.
I don't think anyone is shocked that Trump and Vance are still saying that there were issues with the 2020 election. I don't think anyone is actually shocked by that. Are you?
To certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election.
I don't know what Tim actually delivers to the ticket. Shapiro, I feel like, would have been a better choice until now.
We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
So I believe we're now over time. Yeah, I thought it was supposed to be 90 minutes. Did I misread that? Anyways, we can come right back to that here in just a minute. I want to check in on X, and I'll also see, other than, looks like we don't have any other new comments, which is fine. Just kind of look in, see what people are saying on X. So we have some articles here. Gavin Newsom told us to look at the record for Trump's economy. lost some jobs, created over 15 million jobs. That's the record. And then a lot of people disagreeing. Like I said, with X, you get both sides. I comment on both sides. I respond to both sides. So my feed is full of both sides. And that's fine. Donald Trump murdered Ashley Babbitt. I don't know about that. Kind of a hot take, but again, it is what it is. Greg, always, if you're not following Greg, guys, you're messing up. Why do you guys feel like Vance and Walz are going to stop at the pub next door and have a beer together when the debate's done? That would be nice. It'd actually be kind of nice if people started getting along, but 24 straight minutes of denying election results. Interesting username, but like I said, I have a video on that, guys. So, and it's not just Democrats. Like, don't get it twisted. Both sides are doing this. The Uniparty has been ensuring that both sides do a lot of things for many, many years. $1,900 a month out of pocket for insurance before the ACA paid $25 a week. That's a pretty big change. Redheaded Libertarian is a contributor at Timcast, I believe. New York Times. No harm, but take no. Okay, yep, Timcast. So Spaces with Josie, cool. Masterclass by JD Vance. So I think overall, like, I agree with Tim here. I think that JD Vance is doing a little bit better. I think they're both doing fairly well. This debate, I think they're better performing than they were in the presidential debate. I think that we're getting better, more clear answers out of the VP debate. Give Tim Walz. So Derek, again, a former legislator out of West Virginia here, said has a lot of nerve to stand on national TV to tell a lie. Okay, well, I thought it was going to be more unbiased, but border crossings were down from when Trump's in office. No fact checks needed. Everyone. Okay, well, I would like to see numbers. Does anyone in here have numbers? No. Okay, that's fine. We'll come back. We'll check it out later. Justice prevails. Tesla won a dismissed shareholder lawsuit alleging self-driving capability. Okay, good for you, Elon. Say here in New York City at Trump's hotel launching the I'm a Veteran, Not a Sucker or a Loser tour. Okay. Again, conflating things, taking things maybe a little bit out of context, but that's fine. You're allowed to say it. See? First Amendment's important. You're allowed to say it, and people can fact check you on it. And that's just the way it works. More Gen Z workers are trained to become plumbers and electricians if we've lost faith in college degrees. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think that we're better off if people are going back into the trades? I think we are, right? Because overall, college has gotten astronomically expensive, and I don't really know what it gets you. Yes, there are certain degrees that do get you a better paying job on the back end. That makes sense. But there's a lot of degrees, guys, that people just went to college because we were all told everybody has to go to college because that's how you get ahead in life. So there's a lot of people that got degrees that just don't make sense for long-term financial gain or stability. So I think it's good that people are getting back into the trades. We need tradespeople, especially if we're going to have any kind of rejuvenation in our economy and want to build more.
Debate. It is now time.
Looks like we're back up.
Statements. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up,
that was on me. Sorry.
Folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters.
That show's still on.
And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built. From Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead.
I agree. I hope things do get better, but I still don't know what an opportunity economy is.
Bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you.
Decent closing statement. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change.
I agree with that.
We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle.
I thought both of them.
I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until...
Yep, 35 days, guys. Super important. It's good to get out to vote. Take a friend, take family members, make an evening of it. Just do something and vote. Regardless of which side you support, I encourage you to educate yourself, figure out what you want to do with your vote, and vote. That's what the whole system's all about, guys. And if there are things that you disagreed with, that's fine. But we need to be able to talk about them. Just like calling each other names and doing stuff doesn't accomplish anything positive. There's no good change or good result that we're going to get from that. I hope that you all really enjoyed watching the debate. I thought this debate went better than the presidential debate that we had. I thought that they were more cordial with each other. I thought we got more answers to questions. We still didn't get a lot of them, which is normal in politics, unfortunately. But I've already made my decision, guys. I think if you've looked at my channel for any length of time, you understand that. But I don't shut down other people. Like I'm very upfront with what my views are, but I encourage you to speak out and to bring up a different perspective. I may end up telling you that I completely disagree with you, but I'll try. Maybe not on X. Things get a little spicier over on X, but I will try to be somewhat respectful and actually have a conversation with you. It might take time to get back to your messages. I'm very busy. I work 60 to 65 hours a week at my normal job. I am raising 2 young children. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. That's part of why my daycare and schooling costs almost exceed the cost of my mortgage. And then on the side, I've got to make videos for the YouTube channel. I've got to do live streams like this one for y'all. So just be patient with me. It might take me a day or 2 or 3. And once it's passed, like the way that the YouTube does comments, it's very difficult to go back when there's too many comments and you get too far down in the same comment. The YouTube setup, the way they have their dashboard, it's just not easy to keep track of. So I apologize if I lose track of a conversation. It's not intentional, but when I put out the number of videos that I put out, getting back down to the comments from weeks prior is just difficult. I just don't have that much time. So just be patient with me. If anything, just make a new comment. Don't respond under a previous comment. That's the easiest way for me to see it because YouTube's very good about highlighting new comments. So I hope you all have a good week. I've got a lot of work still to do this week. Got a lot of people that I'm responsible for, both at work and at home. But hope you enjoyed watching the debate with me. A little bit of fact checking that we were able to do. A little bit of news. We didn't really talk about it in the beginning, but guys, the world is a less safe place today than it was yesterday. Things have definitely escalated in the Middle East. That's not good. Hopefully things don't escalate elsewhere. This is October 1st. The October surprise, I hope this is all we're going to get. I really hope things don't escalate. I do, because in general, I think less human suffering in the world is a good thing and a good goal. And today there is more suffering than there was yesterday. So I don't know what your thoughts are on all that, but just thoughts and prayers for the people in North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida that were affected by the hurricane that are still dealing with issues. Big props to people like Nick Sortor that are out there dealing with it, that are helping those people on the ground. They're delivering Starlink internet service. They're delivering food and help. Big props to those people. They're private citizens doing that, man. That just shows what kind of country we really are. So thank you guys for being some of the best of us. And I hope that you can continue to do it. So I'm going to be signing off. Y'all have a good night. Take care of yourselves.